Hey, all you email marketers, this episode is for you. I'm bringing on a veteran email marketer. She's had 30 years in this discipline and is on the bleeding edge of what's next when it comes to email marketing. So we'll talk strategy from how to audit how your email marketing programs are doing beyond just those diagnostic KPIs that you might be using. We'll talk about myths and best practices around email marketing executions, such as is there a right day and time to send emails out? How should you construct subject lines? Should you get your hands on third-party lists as part of your email campaigns? And then finally, we'll wrap up with AI. How can AI tools help you make your email marketing program stronger, and where are they a distraction? Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, True Marketing. True is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit truemarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined today by Jean Jennings. She is the founder of the Email Optimization Shop, and today we're going to be talking all things email strategy, execution, best practices, myth busting. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for being here today.
Oh my gosh, Wendy, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to talk to you and your audience.
Well, I have lots of questions for you, so get ready. You're in the hot seat today, but I think you can handle it. Jean, I had so much fun just reading a bit about your career journey, and we had some almost paths crossed back in the 90s. So I'll let you, if you don't mind, share a little bit about your journey and what led you to being a solopreneur. I can't say that word, solopreneur. I think that's right.
Awesome. As you mentioned, I'm CEO of Email Optimization Shop, which is my boutique consulting firm. It was actually kind of exciting because I got into working in online in 1989 for CompuServe. I was with the Business Services Group. So we were helping large associations like American College of Physicians was a client, and companies like Marriott and NovaCare take their communications online. And I don't know if people remember 89. It's funny, I just had a reunion. A bunch of my friends from college went to the beach, and one of my friends said to me, I just can't believe it. I thought you sold computers. And now I realize you were on like the cutting edge of all this stuff. And I was like,
yeah,
that was us.
That was us.
So it was a great way to get to it. I mean, I learned about how to take content online, very, very early before most people were even thinking about it. So when the World Wide Web came about, I jumped into the publishing industry because publishers had content they wanted to take online. I knew how to do that. And it's just been a wild ride. It's been a lot of fun. Back in 2000, I was head of email product development, and I had like a dotted line to marketing. So I worked a lot on marketing stuff for Reed Business Information US, which formerly was Connors. So part of Reed Elsevier. So we had 100 magazines, and I was part of the digital team. We would go in and basically redo the website. And then it was really a lot of fun. Oddly enough, it was a lot of work, but like Variety had one newsletter. And so I went there and we decided, I put forth a plan to segment the audience and then target the content, because what I found is that people who were working in theater didn't want to read so much about what's going on in TV.
Sure.
So we kept the general email, but we built out 7 others that were based on geographic or channel preferences. And it was a tremendous boon because it allowed us to provide better content to our subscribers, but it also gave us more advertising to sell, which was one of their revenue streams back then. And we could charge more for the targeted newsletters. even though it was a smaller subscription base, because they knew that everyone on there was actually interested in what they were saying. So it was a really great way to kind of learn about things.
Yeah. And you think now, I mean, marketers listening that are younger would say, well, yeah, I mean, of course, email segmentation, audience segmentation. But back then, that was very cutting edge, innovative. Not a lot of people were doing that, being thoughtful and personalization. Forget about that. I mean, so, oh, really cool.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, it's really kind of exciting because things back then, when I worked at CompuServe, we used to say we were doing stuff that was bleeding edge.
yeah.
Because we would literally talk to the businesses, and then we would work with the product development teams to say, what can we do with this? And so you learned how to create discussion groups and uploads, and it sounds really silly right now, but back then it was very exciting and it was very new.
Yeah. Well, you're obviously following a pattern because here, yet again, you're continuing to stay ahead of the curve and being on the bleeding edge of email strategy, how we send out our email, what our newsletters look like, everything from content strategy to whether or not we should time our sends. We'll talk about that. But I
Yeah.
think it's great. And I'm excited to learn from you today. So
Thanks.
let's start with just a basic question here, or maybe it's not basic, but for marketers that are wondering, like, am I doing a good job with email marketing? How can they get a pulse on that?
Yeah, it's important to get a pulse on it. Back when we started, like the mid 90s, it was just getting it sent was just that was your goal, right? Because that was so difficult and new. But now in 2024, we really need to be looking at performance. So it's not just about whether it's working, but it's about what's working and what's not, and how to improve that performance over time. Because we know a lot more about that now than we knew 25 years ago. The
Okay.
most important thing is to make sure that you're using business metrics for your KPIs. So, what's a business metric? Well, I think when most people think of email, they think of open rates, they think of click rates. Those are actually diagnostic metrics. So, they tell you how people are engaging with your email, but they don't actually tell you whether your email is meeting its goal. Because for most of us, when we send an email, there's a goal that's a conversion. Maybe you want someone to fill out a lead form in the B2B world. There might be a revenue conversion if you're selling things directly. Maybe this is a nurture campaign and your goal is to get someone to, download a document. So we really want to think about what those things are, because those are going to be your business metrics. So business metric is typically a conversion rate or a revenue-based metric like revenue per email. Even if it's just so, like, again, I come from the publishing industry. So in some of those cases, our goal was really just to get them to get to the site and look at, say, 3 pages, because we were trying to monetize the ads on the site. And in order to do that, we needed eyeballs. So we weren't going for a click. We wanted someone to click through, but then we wanted them to visit at least 3 pages on the site, 3 articles. So that's what you need to figure out, is kind of what is it that keeps the lights on at your business. And that's what you need to focus on when you're doing email marketing sense, is using those as your KPIs.
Okay, so
So
the
one,
diagnostic are still helpful for the marketer themselves. However, when they're
yes.
reporting back to business, would you argue that, okay, if the diagnostics are looking good, let's focus in on the impact we're making with those business metrics and not even report on the other, just have it there to know where we need to troubleshoot?
So KPI means key performance indicator. So it means that's what's going to be the gauge of the success or failure of your business. The diagnostics are there as levers you can use to try to get that KPI up. So you might look at
Okay.
it and say that, our revenue has dropped since last year. Or let's use lead gen. Our number of leads we're getting from our email program has dropped since last year. So that's your KPI. So let's go back and look at that diagnostics and see if we can figure out why. So if you take a look at the diagnostic and you're like, wow, like our leads are off by 20% from last year, conversion rate wise. Our clicks are off by 18%, and our open rate is pretty much stable. It's pretty clear the problem is people are opening, but they're not clicking. And so that's where the diagnostics come in handy. So then you can kind of look at what you were doing last year versus this year and try to figure out why they might not be clicking. It might be an audience situation, but that's really the idea with the diagnostics. They're the things that you can look at to try to figure out the why. And then those are also the levers you would move to get that KPI back up and performing.
Great. Would you say it's more important to benchmark against yourself and past performance or using some sort of industry standards?
you've got to benchmark against yourself. Internal benchmarks are the only way to go. You've got to know what you were doing. When I work with clients, I often start out by doing an audit, and I will basically look at their performance for the last 3 to 5 years. The very first graph that I show when I present this charts their send quantities, and I usually do it by quarter for all those 3 to 5 years. And those are the bars, and then align with markers, which is your revenue generated per email or your leads generation conversion rate, and see how that's doing. And that is a very, very telling graph. Just with that one chart, you can take a look at it and get a feel for what's going on, whether it's good or bad. And then you start to dive into the opens and clicks and figure out how to address it.
Got it. And very good advice there. Now, I know when we were speaking earlier this week, we talked about Apple's mail privacy protection thing that they unrolled and how it really messed with metrics. So could you touch on that?
Yeah. So it was basically late 2021, I think, that Apple implemented mail privacy protection. It was interesting. They came out with this announcement before they implemented it. And their whole point was, we want to provide more privacy to the people who are getting email on Apple devices. So it's not just Apple emails or Mac emails. It's people getting emails on Apple devices, which for most people, if you have an iPhone, you're probably using the native mail app. That's Apple. And they said, marketers can take a look at when you open and geographically where you are when you open and whether or not you open. And we think that's something we need to protect you from. So they basically put in mail privacy protection so that marketers could no longer get insight into whether you were opening your email or when you were opening it or where you were when you opened it. So that was interesting. When they announced it, they didn't really say how they were going to do it. So there was a lot of curiosity. But what they ended up doing was they ended up opening every email that comes to an Apple device immediately upon receipt. So it was interesting because instead of just sort of, trying for us not to be able to see opens, they did the opposite. They just flooded the zone. And that caused most people's open rates to go up dramatically.
Sure.
Open
and
rates,
falsely, of course.
open rates used to be used. I'd say the primary use for them was with re-engagement campaigns. And you would say, well, they haven't opened in 3 months or 6 months or a year. We're going to put a re-engagement campaign in place and try to get them to open again. So all of a sudden that wasn't a good metric for that because there were all these opens that were MPP opens, fake opens.
Yeah.
But here's the thing of it. Open rate was never an absolute metric anyway, because of the way it's tracked. It's an invisible pixel that gets pulled back to the server when you open it. So it's almost like it's pinging an image, but there's no image, and we track an open. So a lot of people, that margin of error was caused by, there might be people who were scrolling through their inbox, and if they a split second opened your email, that would ping even though you hadn't read it. The other thing we have is a lot of email clients are still blocking images by default. If you read an entire email 5 times in detail with images blocked, no open would register.
Wow. So open's just really off of reality for lots of reasons. Yeah.
So there was always this little margin of error, and then Apple MPP made the margin of error huge. So I think the key to success here is just understanding it's not an absolute metric.
Right.
Now, from send to send with the same list, the same audience, you can use it as a relative metric. You can use it as a directional metric.
Okay.
But, you want to be careful how much you leverage that because it's just not really right anymore.
Yeah.
When it happened, so I'm also general manager of Only Influencers, which is a community of email industry professionals. We had a lot of different of our blog contributors writing about this. We did webinars about this. So if you're not familiar with MPP, if you want to go to onlyinfluencers.com, click on the link of webinars and white papers, you can learn more. But it's an important thing to understand. And even now, I sometimes run across people who are like, my open rates are great. They're like 65%. And you have to kind of break the news.
Yeah. No, they're not. Good try. But they could look at year over year and show some change there. And that's somewhat valid. It's a good.
They could. There was that, that late, and it was a slow rollout. So I would say late 2021, September-ish is when it started. It kind of continued all through 2022. So
we're just kind of now getting to that point where we're
now getting to the point where, kind of before and after.
Good. Okay. Well, let's switch gears. And I'd like to talk to you about different myths that people have out there or questions. I polled my team and asked what burning questions they had for you. And you and I had some others that you get asked a lot. So this is a fun little list. Let me see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about eight questions. Okay. You ready?
All right.
Okay, here we go. Is there a particular time or a particular day of the week that's just perfect for sending your emails out?
That's a great question. So it's funny because there are reports out there that are claiming to tell you the best time of day or the best day to send. And sometimes they were even like, well, send this day if you want opens, but send that day if you want clicks.
Yeah, it's
I
like
got to tell you,
Tuesdays at 3 p.m. or Thursdays
right,
at 10
Tuesdays at
a.m.
3.
or whatever. Yeah.
But you gotta think this through. So let's say it's Tuesdays at 3 p.m. If everybody started sending Tuesday at 3 p.m., the best time to send email would be any other time.
Yeah, exactly.
So no, those kind of easy button solutions, if you really think through them, they don't really work. But that said, there are ways to find out your best day and time to send. So one of the easiest ways is most email platforms now offer some sort of send time optimization. It can be either based on your list as an aggregate, or sometimes they do it by individual, and then they spread that send out. So that's an easy way to do it. There's also a couple other ways like logic and reason. You can look at website traffic. I just actually wrote a blog post about this because I had a friend, an old friend, who sent me one of those reports and said, hey, I thought you should see this. There is a best day and time to send email. And I'm like, oh, no, there's not. So definitely you want to play with that. Here's the thing of it, though. It's important to understand. Day and time of send, as long as you use reason and logic, like don't send in the middle of the night. You don't want to be there in the morning. I don't know about you. My inbox in the morning is full and I'm like, delete, read immediately,
Yeah.
skip, delete. Think about when they're going to be in front of their computer or have time on their phone to read your email. I used to try to get newsletters to people in their local markets right before lunchtime because I was always one of those people who would eat lunch at my desk and read industry pubs. So just use logic and reasoning to figure out when might work. You can definitely A/B split test based on that. And like I said, I just read a blog post about 6 ways to figure this out. So go to, you can check that out on my blog, Email Optimization Shop. But yeah, don't believe those reports and start sending Tuesday at 3 or Thursday at 2 or whatever they tell you. That's really not a good solution.
Okay. And I like what you said about a lot of the email tools have some logic built into them, or maybe some AI technology, whatever it is, driving that to where it might be different from one person to the next. They may be looking at country or whatever it is. So take advantage of those features that you're already
And they
paying
will
for.
actually look at the historical data they have on that person or that group. So that's the
Great.
beauty of it. They're
Yes.
not guessing industry standard. It's actually your list and when they're most likely. Now, the downside is they're looking at usually opens or clicks, not conversions.
Okay.
And really what you want to goal to is conversions.
Yeah.
But it's a starting point. It's better than nothing if you really
Yeah.
feel like you need something to hang your hat on.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
What about subject lines? What are some of the myths around that?
Subject lines. Oh my goodness. I often see these articles that are like long subject lines are better, but then I see another article that says short subject lines are better. I got to tell you, the truth is the only thing that matters with subject line is what the content is. It doesn't matter whether it's long or whether it's short. It matters what it says because you want it to engage the reader. And typically readers want to know what's in it for them if they open this email. I will say that the first 25 characters are really critical in both the email and the pre-header text because if you look at your phone or even on your computer, most subject lines get truncated. They typically get truncated around that 25 to 30 character space.
Okay.
So it's not that it should only be that long. It's just that you want to have your most important information in there.
Got it.
I had a client years ago for a holiday campaign, and the subject lines they were using as their control were 25 days of Christmas, socks, $5 today. And it wasn't doing very well. So we literally
Sounds
just
kind of flipped. Yeah.
Yeah. Socks, $5, 25 days of Christmas. And the performance, I think we almost doubled sales revenue per email.
Yeah.
So simple things like that can actually go a long way. And again, it's all a theory, but my theory is it was the truncation,
Yeah. Yeah. What about when people are sending newsletters and they say, newsletter : and then they have, a phrase or a little bit about what that newsletter is like? Is this a similar example where you would suggest flipping that, or would you have a different opinion on that?
So I've done a lot of work over the years with newsletters. Like I said, with Read, we had 100 publications, and each of them had multiple newsletters that we either created or revamped. My best advice for newsletters is to focus on the content of each individual newsletter. Mm-hmm. So rather than saying like, your newsletter for November, look at what the newsletter is. Typically, so I have my own email newsletter. We typically have 6 items in it. We typically choose the topics of 2 of them for the subject line. So it might be better ways to use AI, finding the best day to send, and then 2 for the pre-header, and then we have a headline. So we use 2 for the headline. So your really best bet is to figure out what is the content of that email that might engage people, and use those topics in your subject line, your pre-header, and your headline.
Great.
I also sometimes, if I'm doing, because I do a lot of industry publications, if there's someone who's like considered an expert in the industry, I sometimes will use their name. The latest from Chad S. White, who's a big deal in our industry, who's also a lovely gentleman. So yeah, you want to definitely think in terms of a unique subject line for each newsletter you send, and that value benefit. What topic in there is going to spur people to want to open it now and read it?
Great. This was so timely because this morning I received one that said email newsletter number 2. I was like, okay, 1, I don't remember receiving number 1. And is this like you made a mistake on number 1? This is number 2. And I opened it because
number 2 has a lot of connotations.
Fair. And it was so intriguing to me. And then when I read it, I'm like, oh, this was what a terrible, guys. No. So anyway.
You want to test. I've worked with clients and they'll say, oh, we use intriguing subject lines. We don't want to tell people what's in there. And it's funny because I've always found that straightforward subject lines work better. And so we will often test a straightforward subject line versus an intriguing subject line. One of them is the hot new gift. And then for the straightforward subject line, we just said, this product is the hot new gift.
I've socked for $15. Yeah, no.
Right. And the straightforward one usually works better. So I understand the intrigue idea. I do, but you should really test straightforward because it's really what works with the audience. That's one thing in marketing, right? I have people like, oh, but I don't like it. And I'm like, okay, but it generated 70% more revenue.
Yeah. Who are you targeting? Yourself or
So I think that's one thing in marketing you need to learn early on. It's not about whether you like it, it's how it resonates with the audience. And if it's driving more conversions in terms of leads or whatever it is your goal is, that's what you go with, even if you don't personally find it appealing.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of intrigue, how about emojis? Are you thumbs up or thumbs down on using emojis? I had to go there. I had to, right?
You had to go there. I think emojis is another one of those places where my answer has to be, it depends. The whole point of an emoji is to get your email to stand out in the inbox. So if you're like, I'm going to put a red heart in the subject line on Valentine's Day, that's probably not going to help you stand out in the inbox. Not now. Maybe 15 or 20 years ago. That said, there are times when an emoji can have that effect. So for instance, it's funny, I got an email about an upcoming must-attend event, and they had a bullseye emoji at the front of the subject line. So that was kind of cool. That did kind of catch my eye in the inbox. The key is really to test it to see if it boosts response. The other thing I've seen a lot of people do is they'll put that emoji at the end of the subject line and it'll be character like 40. That's pretty much a waste because nobody's going to see it.
Right.
So if you're gonna go there, put it in the front, put it near the front. And, a lot of times those things can help, but you need to A/B split test it and make sure. The other thing I was going to mention is there is a really cool site. It's like Wikipedia, but it's for emojis. It's Emojipedia. And it not only shows you all of the emojis that are available, and you may or may not know this, emojis render differently in different email clients. So it may not look the same in Gmail as it looks in Outlook. But not only do they show you what's available, you can search on keywords, show you what it'll look like in each of the clients. They actually give you the code you need to pull it in to your subject line or your document or whatever. So it's kind of a fun site to play with.
Great.
It also gives you an idea of kind of what the meaning behind them is, which you kind of want to be careful about. There's some emojis that look like one thing, but they actually can mean something else. So you want to make sure you're careful about that as well.
Okay. Emojipedia. Do I have that right? Okay. We'll throw a link to that in the show notes along with your blog that you mentioned earlier.
Awesome.
Good. Okay. So how about ZoomInfo and just in general, buying or renting a third-party list? What are your opinions on that?
Oh my gosh. So this is like cold email marketing en
Yeah,
masse.
it is.
It's difficult and it's a high risk endeavor. So I'm not going to lie. I know some people who buy lists from those sources and others. And it's funny. I had a client that was really into buying lists. And we were actually, the marketing manager and I were trying to break the higher up person of this habit, because we had to put all sorts of precautions and we had to send those non-opt-in names from a different IP address so it wouldn't damage, because if you get blocked, and that's one of the main reasons that people get blocked for sending to non-opt-in names, it affects everything that goes from the IP address. So we actually had a separate ESP that we used for those names. And then if we mailed them enough and there weren't complaints and unsubscribes, then we would move them over. So you have to be really, really careful about it. But that said, sometimes it worked. We did this test where we separated all of the paid lists from the opt-in list, and we actually, each paid list had its own segment. And you know what's crazy? One of them actually worked very well, and the other ones didn't work at all. And so you never really know, but you just need to be very careful with it. I had a client who did a lot of this cold email marketing en masse, and I would sit in these meetings. They actually created their own internal deliverability team. And they'd be like, we're doing this and we're doing that and we're doing the other thing. And are we safe? And I said, look, you're telling me you don't want to get hurt at all. But then you're telling me you're planning to jump out of a plane. And you're telling me that you have a parachute and you're in tandem with someone who has a parachute. You put a mattress on the ground and you padded yourself with bubble wrap. And I said, the thing is, you can do all these things, but the only way to make sure you don't get hurt is just not to jump out of the plane in the first place.
Fair.
And so if those things are working for you, that's great. Typically, it's better to use those for one-to-one Salesforce communications than for mass emails. And they have some icky ways that they're collecting their addresses. One of those groups that you mentioned, they strike a deal with people. They say, look, if you put this plug-in on your computer, we'll give you X names for free every month. What that plugin does is it actually goes into your inbox and it scrapes the names, titles, email addresses, basically all the information in the signature email, as well as the email address, and they add it to the database and they sell it. So
wow,
that's another thing that to me, that's just very icky.
Yeah.
I'm emailing people for a reason, and then they have that all of a sudden my contact details are in this database being sold. So
yeah, I think icky is a very mild word to use to describe this business practice. So yeah.
And it's interesting. The United States is very lax. We have CAN Spam Act of 2003, and in the industry we joke and we call it's the You Can Spam Act, because all it requires is an unsubscribe in the footer. Places like the European Union, very different, much, much stricter on this. You have to get an explicit opt-in. Even Canada, I think there's a period of time, if you've met someone at a conference or there's been some actual contact, you can email them for a couple months without getting explicit permission, but then you have to get explicit permission. So yeah, there's some things about our federal laws that just make this difficult, because it's legal, but it's going to get you blacklisted, and it's just not a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. Not a good idea. Okay, check. Moving on then. Let's talk about just newsletters in general. What are some trends you're seeing? What's working well? How have things changed over the past, 5 or so years?
It's funny. Years ago, there was this article in the New York Times about how email's not dead because newsletters can be really great. Everyone in the industry kind of was like, this is news?
Yeah, this isn't news.
So yeah, newsletters can be really great. The key to successful newsletter is making sure the content is not all about us. So I don't know about you. I've gotten these B2B newsletters and they're like, hey, we hired a new sales manager and he'll be calling you. Hey, we signed a new client. That's not the thing you want to do. You want to think about how you can help the client, if it's a B2B thing, do their job better or enjoy their hobby more. You want to think about things you can do without a purchase to make their lives better.
Yeah.
And typically that involves a content ratio. In my newsletters, I want to have at least 60% editorial content. Editorial meaning there's value without a purchase. Mm-hmm. No more than 40% promotional content, because if you're sending it, you want to have some sort of promotion in there. But just focusing on, that editorial content is going to get the open and people are going to engage. And then while they're in there engaging, they're going to see the promotional content.
Okay.
So there's definitely a place for it. I worked with a company years ago. It's a consumer brand. If I said it, you would totally know who it is. And it was interesting because they sent a weekly newsletter and they sent a monthly standalone promotion to their list. Well, the weekly newsletter, each individual issue of it drove more revenue as far as people joining and signing up than that promotional email.
Interesting.
And it was because the content was so good, and you would just get in there and you would be reading it and watching the videos and you'd be like, wow, if they're giving away all of this for free and they obviously know what they're doing because I'm seeing testimonials, I'm going to sign up for this because if they're giving all this away for free, imagine the great value I'll get when I'm actually a paid customer. So that's kind of what you want. You want a newsletter like that just people love it, that it drives them to kind of get to know your organization more. And newsletters can do that. They're a great way to keep your brand top of mind, to position you as an expert. So they're really an important part of the mix. If you're not doing an email newsletter, I highly recommend that you look into it because it really can help out, especially in the B2B world.
Good.
If you do it.
Absolutely agree. Right there with you. Email's not dead, and newsletters are doing extremely well for technical companies, and the frequency in which they send it out varies from company to company. And of course, there's lots of data there to drive those decisions too, but it has to be helpful, not promotional, like you said. So yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So another newsletter trend we're seeing are people experimenting with LinkedIn newsletters. What are your opinions on those?
So I'm not really pro or con on LinkedIn newsletters, and I actually have one. But here's the thing. You don't own the LinkedIn platform. So the trouble is that if someone leaves LinkedIn, or if you leave LinkedIn, you're no longer going to have a way to reach these people. And lest you say to me, oh, come on, that'll never happen. Some of us are old enough to remember MySpace, which was a big player before Facebook came in and then everybody left. I think we're all old enough to remember Twitter, which is now X. And a lot of people have left that platform for various reasons. So that's the problem. You're like building this newsletter on a platform that you don't control that could go away tomorrow. Here's how I like to use social media, including LinkedIn and LinkedIn newsletters and articles and all of that. I think they can be great ways to build your internal email list. Because social media channels like this, let's focus on LinkedIn, because that's really the B2B one that most people are using, although there are niche ones for B2B that can be great too. It's a low commitment way for people to get to know your brand, your product, your service, yourself. And the key there is that once they're comfortable enough with you and they know that they're interested and there's value there, you want to be able for them to initiate that email relationship because that takes that discussion to another level. All of a sudden, if they're on your email list, you can segment and target content. You can provide them more relevant information. So it's a much stronger relationship than you're going to have on a social network. So that's really how I like to use social networks. I like to use social networks to drive people to get to know me, but then to sign up for my email list. And that's how I use my LinkedIn newsletter. My LinkedIn newsletter is called Best of Email Optimization Shop. And the idea is once a month, I'm going to put the best of up there. But if you like what you're reading, you really should sign up to get the weekly because there's a lot more information.
I like that. So instead of just simply repeating the same content on both platforms, you're having the teaser, if you will, on LinkedIn that entices people to join your opt-in email. And that way they get more in-depth information on a more frequent basis. Great strategy. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Last big question, and it's a doozy. AI, we got to talk about AI, of course.
Oh my gosh, we have to talk about AI.
Okay, so what are you experimenting with? What's working? What's not working? Which that's as important as what is working. So
it is. So I'm going to admit something up front. At first, I was very skeptical. I was reading all these articles that said, hey, you can create an entire email with AI. Let us show you how. And at the end of it, I would look at the email they created and I'd be like, it's just not very good. So here's the thing of AI. I think if you are not doing any email marketing, it's probably a tremendous help to you because you can create something that's better than you could do on your own. But if you have, there's like a bar, right? If you have a basic level of experience, the AI is not going to create, just putting in the information and letting it do its thing alone is not going to create anything great. But what I found is that if you use it in an iterative process, it can be really useful. So I've done a couple webinars on this for only influencers. I'm actually teaching a half-day workshop on using AI for marketing in Phoenix, Arizona as part of the Email Innovations World Conference. The key is that innovative process. It's got to be a collaboration between you and the AI. And I think we all need to get over the idea that the AI is smarter than you are. I got to tell you, in most cases, it is not. But it can do things a lot faster than we can sometimes. And that's, I think, where I see the real benefit. And again, if you use an iterative process, you can keep it on track. So, there's, like I said, the one webinar, well, both the webinars we did just kind of walk you through. It's almost like a workshop, how you do these things. So just think about it in an iterative process, ask it for a little bit of it, then get it back on track, ask it for more. One thing I love using it for, so the other thing I've been doing is, in addition to using GPTs that have been created for specific purposes, customized public GPTs that are available on ChatGPT, I've been creating my own GPTs. So I created one that actually does charts and graphs for me. So I basically upload a spreadsheet. It knows my brand colors. It knows my standard charts and graphs that I use. And I upload a spreadsheet, and I have to make sure that the titles of the columns match the titles that it knows for each of these numbers. But it does the calculation and it kicks out a chart or a graph for me. And that has saved me so much time, because literally you've got your finished chart or graph, within 60 seconds of uploading the spreadsheet.
Wow.
So that's one thing I like it for. I do like it for brainstorming. The other thing we've been playing with is creating personas, again, custom GPT personas, asking them to look over websites, to look over email copy, to give us feedback. What's missing here? Would your persona buy this? What questions or objections would your persona have? So those are things we've always done in marketing, but it's a lot more fun. And I do think it's a lot more effective to do it with a GPT. Yeah. And it's definitely a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways you can do it. Check out some of the work I've done. Ethan Mollick from University of Pennsylvania Wharton School, I just read his book on it. He's done a lot. There's a lot out there. If you're skeptical like I was at first, just try an iterative process and try to learn more about it. Because I really do think that in the future, that's going to be a key skill that marketers need to have no matter what digital channel you're working in. I teach at Georgetown. I'm an adjunct professor in the master's program. I teach digital marketing, and Georgetown's policy on AI is you can use it as long as you let us know that you're using it. My policy in my class is there are certain assignments you must use it, because you have to get familiar with this technology. You have to know how to work with it in an effective way, and you have to understand it. I think too many people are scared of it or skeptical of it. We need to get over that.
Steve, I said at the beginning that you're staying ahead here, and there you just demonstrated that. Ethan Mollick is great. I happened to hear him speak at MACON, and were you at MACON, Jean?
I did not get to MACON, but I'm looking at the one that's happening later this year. I'm hoping to get there.
Yeah. And another great person that spoke there is Chris Penn. So that would be another good person to follow. And he's actually coming on to our podcast in a few weeks. So he is part of Trust Insights and has a lot to say on this subject too. So well, great. This has been such wonderful practical advice for email marketers. Thank you so much. Jean, where can people go to connect with you and learn more about your business?
Sure. Well, you're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just do me a favor. Let me know that you saw my podcast here with Wendy, because I get a lot of cold invites. But if you saw the podcast, I'm happy to connect. My website is emailopshop, emailopshop. My blog is there. I've got a free newsletter that you can sign up for. Those are probably the best ways to reach me. And all of my speaking and webinars and things that I've done are on there. And most of them, you can get them on demand. So feel free to check out the blog, check out the speaking, with the history of speaking. Reach out to me. I love to talk to people about email. It's just a lot of fun. If you're interested in learning more about only influencers and maybe joining, it's $200 a year. Let me know. If you're thinking about coming to Phoenix for the Email Innovations World Conference, which is June 5 to 7, 2024. Use my code and you'll get 20% off your registration. It's Jennings, my last name, 2020. So Jennings 20. Sorry for the plug, but if you're going to come, you might as well save a little money.
Absolutely. I don't mind at all. Hey, we're all trying to help each other get better. So it's wonderful. So I'll throw a bunch of the links to those things in the show notes. And once again, thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Wendy. What a lovely discussion.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.